Hi guys, my name is Patrick. I am a designer by trade, a gamer at heart, and like many of you, I have been absolutely obsessed with Animal Crossing's New Horizons since it has come out. I have spent a lot of time playing this game. I think I just went over 300 hours of gameplay. My boyfriend feels like he's on vacation from me because if I'm not working during the day, then I am playing Animal Crossing at night. And after spending so much time in this game, I've realized that as I develop my island, I've been utilizing a lot of the design principles and sort of philosophies from my work life and putting them into the community that I'm creating on my island. So I figured for my first video on YouTube, welcome to the digital space, Patrick, I would summarize some of those design ideas and hopefully share them with you so you can use them in some of the decisions that you make about your communities in the future. So just a precursor, this is not necessarily like a lot of the other videos that are being made right now. This is really more about using design concepts to drive the development of your island. So if that sounds good to you, let's get right into it. One of the most difficult things for me in my work is looking at a brand new project. If it's like a blank canvas, a piece of paper, a new file in Photoshop, whatever it is, it's so hard for me to just look at that white space and say, okay, this is exactly what I'm gonna do. I have a tough time narrowing down, all the different ideas I have to meet the goal of the project, whatever it is. So in a lot of ways, developing my island has felt kind of similar. We're given this beautiful natural landscape, but it's huge. And we don't know what items we're gonna get, or DIYs, or neighbors, or buildings, or anything like that. We don't know any of that up front. So in a lot of ways, our island feels like, at least to me, that white space. So one of the design principles that I've found is very helpful in getting started on developing my island is that creativity is born from constraint. And now when I say constraint, that can mean a lot of things. In my work, constraint would mean something like, I'm only going to use these colors, or I really want to make sure that I utilize this font family, or maybe I have some reference images and I want to kind of emulate the feeling that they give me. In Animal Crossing, I'll give you a realistic example. In my town, when I first started playing this game, I decided, listen, red and yellow flowers are cute. We like them, they're nice over there. I don't want them on my island. I don't know what it was about these red and yellow flowers, but I wasn't feeling them. I didn't like them, I didn't want them on my island. I've basically been playing this game sort of like in tandem with my best friend. When she first got her game and I went to go visit her island for the first time, I saw that her island was covered in orange flowers. And I was like, hold up, how'd you get these hybrids? I was irritated. I was a little pissed, I'm not gonna lie. So I said, well, how'd you get these hybrids? And turns out she had windflowers. And windflowers, obviously, one of the native colors is orange. So I said, okay, this is my goal. I wanna get these orange flowers. I'm going up to your shop. I'm buying like 30 different flowers and I'm putting them in every single corner I can. And so effectively, that became the first constraint that I put on my island. And that was really the first design decision that I made, which later influenced the different items that I thought would look nice with orange flowers everywhere. So as I started to kind of map out what the visuals of my island would look like, I realized that I have so much space to use, and terraforming is scary. I don't know, something about terraforming is very blank paper to me. So instead of getting overwhelmed by this idea of terraforming and thinking that I had to, kind of create these really elaborate, extravagant spaces, I really kept it very simple. So let's take a look. This is my map, and here's the area that was available to me when I first started the game. And then these are the areas that I've terraformed since starting. So you can see that I really used a very light hand when it came to terraforming. Instead, I decided to appreciate the spaces that the natural landscape gave to me. And it almost kind of became like a challenge when I went to a different area of my island and decided, okay, this is what I want to develop next. It was kind of fun to problem solve, and it was really exciting to, a couple days later walk into Nook's and find just that perfect item that would fit there. So what I found is that I really loved the landscape that the game had given to me when I first started up, and I kind of had everything that I needed to create some really unique and charming spaces. So long story long, don't be afraid to use what you got. There's nothing wrong with really appreciating the island that you're given and building up from there. All right, so now let's talk about my favorite days in the game. Have you ever just walked into Nook's one day and you saw an item in there and you said, Hold up. Have you ever seen an item in Nooks that just hit it right? It just hit different. You just said to yourself, this is checking every single box I have ever had. This is the right color. It's the right aesthetic. She looked cute. She looked right. And I know exactly where she's gonna go. Or sometimes you find those items and maybe you can't place them yet, but you know she's right. So you pick her up, you say, okay, you're coming back to my storage for a couple weeks, you're gonna hang out, and then we're gonna fix you up. Those are my absolute favorite moments in the game. So when I find that right item that just, it clicks for me, something just unlocks in my head and I immediately understand that upon seeing this item, now I know how I want to continue to develop the story of my island. And that leads me into my next tip. And we're going to thank Miss Kondo for this, but the design decisions that you make about your town should be led with the items that you love, or as Miss Kondo would say, the items that bring you joy. I personally don't usually walk over to a space on my island and say, yep, this is gonna be a garden, or that this is gonna be like some little fisherman's home or anything like that. Usually what happens for me instead is that I find a really cool item that continues to tell the story of my island. And so then I say, okay, I gotta get this and figure out where it goes. So let's check out an example that I developed recently. So the first day that Red visited my friend's island, she sent me a picture of what he was offering in case I wanted to come pick something up. And on the side of the picture was the Tremendous statue. And it's kind of like cropped off. And I was like, whoa, what's that? And I can't remember if this was a new leaf, and it just hit right. It was just that item for me. And I said, girl, what is that? So she said, oh no, that one's fake. I said, I don't care, I'm coming to get it. So open up your gates, I'm on my way. Thank you, ma'am, that is mine. So I went over to her island, bought the statue, and the next day I said to myself, this needs a special home. And on my island, I have this huge crater that was made by an asteroid that hit. And right beside it, I have a sort of setup for an archaeologist that is excavating all of the fossils and things like that that have come to Earth because of the big crater this asteroid made. And I thought to myself, you know what? This is a weird item. This Tremendous statue is looking mighty strange. So I think that this is going to be sort of like a little tourist attraction that I want to create next to the excavation site. And so they kind of put it out on display. So you see I have this whole area, it's sort of ceremonious looking. I'll insert a little picture of it at nighttime too. I've uplit it, hit some lights here so it looks a little bit more ethereal. And then I created this little alien propaganda sign too to go with it. And all of this idea literally just came from me seeing this Tremendous statue and knowing that in some way I wanted to make this work on my island. I really try not to look up lists of items or DIYs or things like that. And instead, I really prefer to get and experience items in the game a little bit more organically, or maybe through the help of my friends. And you know, what I found is that then making spaces that celebrate those items that I love, I've ended up with an island that really feels very unique and personal to me and the story that I want to tell with the game. Okay, so now we're going to step away from design principles and philosophies for a second and talk about something that's a bit more tangible. When I first started the game, I felt like it was kind of hard to make environments that felt very full and kind of like lively. And that's because when we first started the game, the scenery items we had were limited to trees, flowers, and weeds. And if you want, you can count fences. The problem is that the very bottom of the leaves on the tree and the tops of the flower petals leave a really big gap. And you know, you can, if you want, as you're building your scene, you can kind of fill that in with another flower behind it or something like that. But it still felt like there was a lot of space between all of the elements that you could use to build your scenes. Plus, we're like basically running around on a roll of toilet paper. So as you move through the environment, the space between these objects really varies and kind of squishes and stretches and all of that. So I was so excited when we got the update to include hedges and bushes. And now with this full lineup of scenery objects, we can really layer them together to create some very full, organic feeling environments. So I want to show you an example. Today, I want to create a fairy ring. And this is sort of meant to be in the middle of a foresty area. You'll see that I've done a little bit of pre-work here. I have some organic looking dirt put down and then a ring of trees kind of around this tree stump in the center. So to get started, I'm going to put down some hedges first. And I'm not going to necessarily put these down in a ring around the tree. Instead, I'm going to use them to fill spaces that I see between these trees to help create more of a full looking circle. So the placement of the hedges will be a little haphazard looking, but I think you'll see in a second how it ends up really filling out the shape. And I'm so thankful that we have these hedges now. One criticism though, I wish that they didn't have the concrete slab on the bottom. I think for the most part, when someone would use these hedges, it would be in a more natural space. So what we're gonna do today is try and hide this slab the best that we can. Now that we have the hedges down, you can already see that that gap that was between the bottom of the tree and the top of the flowers in the first example is gone. And so now we have this whole space filled up. And the more that we kind of layer in front of this, the more organic this area is gonna feel. So next we're gonna go in with some bushes. So again, I'm not necessarily gonna create a ring of these, but I'm gonna look for areas that need to be filled in a little bit more to create a more full looking circle. So as I put these bushes down, you can see that this is helping us out in two ways. The first way is that this is a little bit shorter than the hedge. So because the bushes are shorter than the hedge, we're creating a forced sense of depth. So from the very top part of the tree, all the way down to the top of the bush, we sort of have this gradient of height. This is creating a really smooth transition for your eye, and it's directing your eye on where to go. And the other thing is that the bushes are doing a really great job at covering the slabs under the hedges. And now that the bushes are down, I think that we have a really great looking circle. To me, this looks very full, and to me, it looks very organic. This sort of looks like something that is growing out in nature. And we're gonna take it a step further now, and we're gonna add in some flowers. Now, you can just put down some flowers sort of like in a line as you would to a very tended garden, but I think it's a little bit more realistic that flowers in this type of environment would be staggered. So I'm just gonna place a couple around in areas that I think could use a little bit of life or a little bit of detail. And then I am gonna cheat. I did say that I was gonna use scenery items, but I am gonna use one DIY for this scene. These are log stakes. And what I love about these is they don't take up a lot of visual weight in your scene, but they almost act like the period at the end of a sentence, right? Everything that we're dealing with here is very green. So when you put in these log stakes, it's almost like accenting and adding detail, but not weight to your scene. So you see I'm kind of hiding it behind a bush, I hid it behind a tree over here, and these sort of just help your eye move through the space and it doesn't feel as flat. And now finally, we're gonna wrap up this space with I think a kind of controversial object. I love weeds. Weeds in this game are so beautiful. I think a lot of people aren't big fans, but I think weeds do a lot to, again, creating a natural looking environment, and they make things just feel a little bit more real. So I will say I go a step further with weeds than maybe others would, in that weeds also have visual weight. So this first one here takes up the most visual space. This is the biggest weed, and I put this closest to the densest areas of my scene, because basically what I'm looking to do is create that gradient, even on the ground level. So I want to go from the biggest weed to a medium size and then the smallest or the least visual weight. And this will help kind of taper out from the density and create things that look like they're truly growing up out of the earth, but just slowly doing so. So I start off with this weed, and then I usually will put down one of these little medium shrubby looking things, and then the clovers, because they're super low profile and they're also much smaller than the others. And now that all the weeds are down, that's basically our space. Finishing touch here is that I'm gonna put down some star fragments because they're beautiful and magical, and you need these in any sort of fairy ring in your forest. And then I'm also gonna accent the area with a nice little lantern because ambient light is so beautiful in this game and really brings everything to life at any time of day. So now I'm just gonna have a nice little seat and wait until night. This tip goes back to creating an overall aesthetic for your island by putting down some constraints early on in the development process. It's kind of tough in New Horizons to have a very dedicated aesthetic on your island because, at least at this point in the game, there are a lot of things that are limited, like tables, even furniture sets. These are sort of series staples that we don't really have access to yet. So it's not easy to say, I love this furniture set, and I want to make sure that I use pieces of it all through my island. But instead what you can do is look at your infrastructure items. And when I say infrastructure, I mean bridges, inclines, paths, and fences. The developers of this game gave us some really, really beautiful options for infrastructure items, and it's pretty obvious when you look at them that there are some really intended themes through these objects. So for instance, if you take this red Zen bridge, it looks really nice with the wood planks that you can put down on your ground, and the Imperial fence. Talking about the decisions that you make around infrastructure items is really similar to design conversations that would happen in real life. Think about camping. As you drive in, you see these two huge flower beds that are flanking the driveway, and they're covered in mulch so they grow big and strong. And then around that mulch, there's some gravel that's like very decorative that helps define the space. And then once you check in and you get over to your campsite, you realize that that same gravel is used around the fire pit to make sure that it's a safe environment for everybody and fire doesn't spread. Or maybe that the pavement that you drove in on is the same pavement that's used to mark the entrance of a trail that's nearby. You can use this same concept in your island as you're developing. So I'll give you an example on my island. The first infrastructure item I knew I was going to have to get in this game was the stone fence. This is my favorite infrastructure item. I think that it is so simple and minimal, but really beautiful and has a lot of character to it. I love that when you look at the stone fence, it almost seems as though it's just been there for a while and that it's kind of been washed over by time. So I knew that I was going to use the stone fence, and I was probably going to use it in areas that were meant to feel old or meant to feel like they had just been there. So knowing that I wanted to use the stone fence, an obvious path to pair with this is either of the stone paths, really. They both look great. And a lot of times I'll use them together to create sort of a cobblestone effect through my town. The next infrastructure item that I decided to add was the Zen fence. And to me, this felt like a natural progression because first off, the color palette is very similar. It's neutral grays, but also at the base of the Zen fence is stonework. There's masonry there. So this is a really cool item that feels like it can still exist in this world and may have even been made using the same materials as the stone fence. In this area, this is one of the first places I started developing. It's still not done yet, but I got the hot spring DIY early on in the game, and I knew that I wanted to have an onsen area. So I put the Zen fencing around to kind of structure the area a little bit, but you'll see over here that I do have an area where the stone fencing interrupts the Zen fencing, and this is to kind of create a lookout point. I think that these two work really well together because the materials look very, very similar. From there, I realized that I was going to have to make some more decisions because the town center is brick. And at this point in the game, we can't change how the town center looks, we can't change the pavement, we can't change anything about it. So because of this, I decided that brick needed to be a part of my design and the story that I was telling in my town. I didn't want brick to just exist in the town center. So I decided to use the brick path and the brick stairs in a garden area. And then I paired this with some really nice warm wood fences. And you'll see that I've also used other types of warm wood throughout my town. And this is because not only do these tones complement the brick really well, but also I love the idea that there are so many forested areas on my island, and it seems as though these fences were made using that wood. So when you pull all of my infrastructure items together, to me, it almost tells a story of the resources that were available to me when I started my island. And I also kind of get this feeling that there was something there before I came as well, with all of these sort of old stones and things that have kind of worn down over time. Regardless of the infrastructure items that you're using today or the things that you think you want to use in the future, I'd recommend taking some time and sort of putting them all together to see what the common thread is, so you can tell a better, more realistic story about the island that you're living on. Okay, my last tip, before even talking about it, I want to put out a disclaimer. I want you to play your game how you want to play your game. Whatever you want to do in your game is totally valid. That's up to you. I want you to enjoy it. But for me, when it comes to running through my island, experiencing my island with my friends, or just even like seeing my villagers walk around, I want to be designing spaces that can be interacted with. Part of any design project is thinking through the usability of it. So in my work, is it legible? Can you understand what you're looking at? What is the message that you're taking away? When it comes to Animal Crossing, it really comes down to gameplay. When you're designing spaces, you have to think about, what do I want my friends to do when we're here? Or what different elements of this environment can my villagers interact with? Let me show you a couple examples on my island. This area here had a pond from the natural geography of my town, and I decided from a playability standpoint, I had to put a path here. Sorry, pond. But I left it. I think it kind of looks nice still. It sort of creates some detail in this area. But originally what I had done was I put a nice little chair out and I had a little coffee mug next to it with a little fishing pole. And the idea was that my villager would come out, maybe do some fishing early in the morning and then go home and cook himself a nice meal. But you'll see that since I had to make this change and put a path through it, I sort of just took all of those elements and pushed them over facing out into the river, kind of thinking about what they did. And whereas I think this looks really nice still, you can't really do anything with it. And before I used to see my villagers actually come and sit in this chair, which was really cute and it kind of told the story that I wanted to tell. But now this is totally inaccessible. But if we come over here, let's just walk over this bridge and I'll show you another area. This is my farm. And if we go towards the south of the farm, you can see that there's a little fruit stand here. The story here is that the villager that lives in his house will walk outside and then he'll, walk up to his orchard early in the morning, pick some fruits, come back, sit down at his stand, and then you can come over and have a nice smoothie or some kakigori. Great, super cute area. What I love about this is that it's all functional. So if I wanted to come sit behind the stand and my friend wanted to come buy a smoothie, we could take a really cute picture. And sometimes too, I see the villager that lives in this house actually sitting at his fruit stand. So I think that this is a very successfully designed area because not only does it look good, but it also functions well. And since we're the designers of our island, I feel like it's kind of our responsibility to make sure there's a nice balance of gameplay and beautiful design. Another thing to think about when it comes to creating environments that are sort of cluttered and very full feeling is that there are still a lot of aspects in this game that you need to be able to run around. I can't tell you how many times I've put down weeds in these forested areas and then hit a balloon only for it to just dissipate in this vast forest of weeds and never to be seen from again. Or, like if you're catching bugs and there's a bug that kind of spawns in your forest area, you would still want to be able to run around and actually catch it. But if you kind of clutter up your area a little bit too much without thinking about how the space will be used, you run the risk of missing the bug or missing the special item from the balloon. So again, you can design your spaces obviously however you would like. If you want to just run around in some really beautiful cluttered environments, that's great. I love that too. But for me, I prefer to just really try and think through how I want the spaces to be used and create little moments for my villagers and my friends and family to enjoy when they visit my island. So those are my 5 tips for designing your islands in Animal Crossing New Horizons. Again, I know that these are a little bit not traditional. They're a little less tangible and more based on concept than they are actual tips and how you should be using items on your island. But hopefully you can take some of these ideas away as you continue to make design decisions related to your community. And if you do, please leave a comment below. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you plan on doing anything with these ideas. And otherwise, I foresee myself playing Animal Crossing for a very long time to come. So if you're interested in more Animal Crossing content, please feel free to subscribe as I figure out what I'm doing in this space. Thank you for watching and talk to you soon.